The old radio telescope made a soft humming sound as it turned slowly in the cold winter air. Kim Ji-ho watched it move through his cabin window, sipping his hot tea. The year was 1982, and the snow was falling gently outside his cozy home near Mount Surek. Ji-ho had lived in this cabin for 5 years now, ever since he retired from the Seoul Observatory. Most people thought he was strange for choosing to live alone in the mountains, but he loved it here. The cabin had belonged to his grandfather, who had built the radio telescope in the 1950s. It wasn't very big or powerful, but it worked well enough for Ji-ho's evening hobby of listening to the stars. The clock on his wooden wall showed 8:30 p.m. Ji-ho put on his thick winter coat, grabbed his flashlight, and walked to the small building next to his cabin, where all the radio equipment was kept. The snow crunched under his boots, and his breath made little clouds in the cold air. The night sky was clear despite the falling snow, and the stars twinkled brightly above him. Inside the radio room, Ji-ho turned on the old machines. They filled the small space with warm air and familiar beeping sounds. He had memorized every button and dial over the years. His fingers moved across them without needing to think, like playing an old piano. He sat down in his comfortable chair and put on his headphones. The usual sounds came through. The quiet static of space, the regular beeping of satellites, and the soft background noise of the galaxy. Ji-ho closed his eyes and smiled. These sounds were like an old friend to him now. He knew them all by heart. But then something different caught his ear. Ji-ho sat up straight in his chair. Among the familiar sounds, there was something new. It wasn't loud, just a soft, regular pattern that repeated every few seconds. Beep, beep, pause. Beep, pause. Beep, beep, beep. He had never heard anything like it before. He checked his charts and maps. The signal wasn't coming from any known satellite. It wasn't a weather balloon or a plane. It seemed to be coming from much farther away, somewhere deep in space. Ji-ho's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the dials, trying to make the signal clearer. The snow was falling harder now. Through the small window, he could see it swirling in the beam of his porch light. The wind had picked up too, making the old radio telescope creak as it turned. But Ji-ho barely noticed any of this. His whole attention was focused on the strange signal in his headphones. He grabbed his notebook and started writing down the pattern. Years of working at the observatory had taught him to record everything, even if it seemed unimportant. The signal kept repeating, steady and clear, despite the growing storm outside. Ji-ho looked at his watch. He had been listening for over an hour now. His tea had gone cold, forgotten on the desk beside him. The wind howled outside, but in his headphones, the mysterious signal continued its quiet song. Something told him this was important. In all his years of listening to the stars, he had never heard anything quite like this. It wasn't random space noise or human-made signals. It was too regular, too precise. It almost seemed like. Ji-ho shook his head. "Don't get ahead of yourself, old man," he whispered to himself in the quiet room. But he couldn't help smiling. After all these years of watching the stars, maybe the stars were finally trying to say something back. He settled deeper into his chair, pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, and kept listening. The snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in peaceful white, while in his headphones, the mysterious signal sang its strange song from somewhere among the stars. The knock on Ji-ho's door came just as the snow was getting heavier. He pulled off his headphones, surprised by the sound. Nobody usually visited him during snowstorms. When he opened the door, he found Lee Soo-mai standing there, covered in snow, holding a large thermos and a bag. "I thought you might want some company tonight," Soo-mai said, brushing snow from her coat. "The weather report says this storm will be a big one." Soo-mai worked at the local library in the village down the mountain. She often checked on Ji-ho during bad weather, even though he told her not to worry. "You shouldn't have come all this way," Ji-ho said, but he smiled as he helped her with her coat. The warm smell of soup came from her bag. "But since you're here, There's something strange I want you to hear. Su Mai had known Jeho for 3 years now. She was one of the few people who didn't think he was odd for spending his time listening to space. She followed him to the radio room, carrying her thermos of hot tea and the container of soup she had brought. "Listen to this," Jeho said, offering her the headphones. He had been recording the signal for the past 2 hours. Su Mai sat down and put the headphones on. Her eyes widened as she heard the strange pattern. "What is it?" she asked, taking off the headphones after a few minutes. "I don't know," Jeho admitted. He poured them both some fresh tea from Suma's thermos. "But it's not like anything I've heard before. It's too regular to be natural. But it's not from any satellite or space station I know about." The wind rattled the windows of the small radio room. Su Mai opened her soup container, and the smell of hot kimchi jjigae filled the air. She always brought extra food when she visited, saying Jeho was too skinny. As they ate, the signal suddenly changed. The regular pattern stopped, and new sounds began coming through the speakers. Jeho quickly put the headphones back on. "It sounds different now," he said, his voice excited. "More complex, almost like speech." Su Mai watched as Jeho adjusted the dials with shaking hands. She had never seen him so animated. Usually he was calm and quiet, but now his eyes were bright with excitement. "There," he said suddenly. "Listen." He unplugged the headphones, and a strange sound filled the room. It was like music and speech mixed together, but like no language either of them had ever heard. The sound rose and fell in a pattern that seemed almost familiar, but not quite human. "Jeho," Su Mai said softly, "I think someone is trying to talk to us." The signal grew stronger. Through the static and noise, they could hear what sounded like words, but in a language that was impossible to understand. The radio equipment, which was old but reliable, began to glow with a soft blue light that neither of them had ever seen before. Outside, the snowstorm grew stronger. The wind howled around the cabin, and the radio telescope creaked as it turned by itself, following something in the sky. But inside the small radio room, Jeho and Su Mai sat in wonder, listening to what could only be a message from somewhere among the stars. "Whatever this is," Jeho said, pouring more tea with slightly shaky hands, "I think our quiet winter evening is about to become very interesting." Su Mai nodded, her eyes fixed on the glowing radio equipment. The soup sat forgotten between them as the strange, beautiful sounds filled the room, bringing with them the promise of something extraordinary. The blue light from the radio equipment suddenly filled the entire room. Jeho and Su Mai stood up, watching as all the dials on the old machine began to move by themselves. Outside, the snowstorm had become so thick that they could barely see the trees through the window. Then they heard it, a low humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't coming from the radio anymore. This sound was real, filling the air around them. "We should go outside," Jeho said quietly. Su Mai nodded, and they put on their winter coats. The wind had stopped completely, which felt strange after the heavy storm. The snow was now falling straight down, like it was in slow motion. They walked into the clearing behind the cabin, their flashlight beams cutting through the gentle snowfall. The humming sound grew louder. Above the trees, they saw something moving through the clouds. It was hard to see clearly through the snow, but it looked like it was glowing with the same blue light as the radio equipment. "Is that?" Su Mai whispered, but she didn't finish her sentence. They both knew what it was, something that wasn't from Earth. The object moved lower, hovering over the clearing. It was about the size of a car, shaped like a teardrop, and covered in soft blue lights. Snow swirled around it as it slowly descended, melting before it could touch the craft's surface. Jeho and Su Mai stood perfectly still, their breath making small clouds in the cold air. The craft landed gently in the snow, barely making a sound. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then, with a soft hiss, a door opened in the side of the craft. Warm light spilled out onto the snow, and someone stepped out. The figure looked almost human, but not quite. She was tall and graceful, with silver-white hair that seemed to float slightly in the air. Her skin had a subtle blue tint that matched the lights of her ship. She wore what looked like a simple white suit that glowed faintly. The stranger walked toward them through the snow, leaving no footprints behind. When she stopped a few steps away, she smiled, a very human expression that made Jai-ho and Sumai feel suddenly less afraid. "I am Ambassador Neri," she said in perfect Korean, though her voice had a musical quality to it that made it sound like she was partly singing the words. "I apologize for arriving without warning, but my ship needed to land somewhere safe during your storm." Jai-ho and Sumai looked at each other, then back at their visitor. Neither of them felt scared anymore. There was something gentle and peaceful about Neri that made her presence feel natural, despite how extraordinary this moment was. "Would you like to come inside?" Jai-ho asked, surprising himself with how normal his voice sounded. "It's cold out here, and we have hot tea." Neri's smile grew wider. "That would be wonderful," she said. "Where I come from, we don't have weather like this. I've never seen snow before today." As they walked back to the cabin, the snowfall began to lighten. Neri looked up at the sky with wonder, trying to catch snowflakes in her slightly glowing hands. Sumai noticed that the snow didn't melt when it touched Neri's skin. Instead, each flake sparkled for a moment before floating away like tiny stars. Behind them, the ship hummed quietly in the clearing, its blue lights pulsing gently in the darkness. Above, the clouds began to clear, revealing a sky full of stars that suddenly seemed much closer than before. Inside the cabin, the fireplace filled the room with warm, golden light. Neri sat close to it, fascinated by the dancing flames. She explained that her world had no fire. They used different types of energy there. The way the wood burned and crackled seemed magical to her. Sumai heated up more of her kimchi jjigae, while Jai-ho made fresh tea. They watched as Neri carefully held the warm teacup in her glowing hands, studying how the steam rose from the surface. When she took her first sip, her eyes widened with delight. "This is wonderful," she said, her musical voice full of joy. "We have many advanced ways to get energy and nutrition, but nothing that tastes like this." She took another sip, closing her eyes to enjoy it fully. When Sumai brought out bowls of the hot soup, Neri became even more excited. The ambassador explained that in her world, they had forgotten about cooking long ago. All their food was created by machines. The idea of combining ingredients to make something new was strange and beautiful to her. "Please, show me how to eat this properly," Neri said, holding her spoon the way Sumai demonstrated. She tried the soup carefully, and her hair seemed to glow brighter with pleasure at the taste. The way it's both hot and cold, spicy and smooth. It's like a whole story in one bite. As they ate, Neri told them about her world. It was a place of eternal summer, where people lived in tall crystal towers that floated in the air. They had solved all their basic problems long ago, but in doing so, they had lost some of the simple pleasures that humans still enjoyed. "Watch this," Jai-ho said after dinner. He opened the cabin door and showed Neri how to catch snowflakes on her tongue. The ambassador laughed with delight at the sensation of the snow melting. Her laughter sounded like tiny bells ringing. Sumai taught Neri how to make paper snowflakes, cutting shapes into folded paper. The ambassador created beautiful patterns that seemed to glow slightly, just like she did. She hung them in the window, where they caught the firelight, and cast strange, lovely shadows on the walls. "My people were worried about making contact with Earth," Neri admitted as they sat by the fire later. "We watched your television and radio signals, and we saw many stories about humans fighting or being afraid of visitors from space. We thought you might react with fear or anger. Not everyone would welcome you the way we have," Sumai said honestly, "but many would. Sometimes the simplest moments show the truth about people better than big events." Jai-ho nodded, pouring more tea for everyone. "In the old days, Korean travelers could always count on finding shelter in villages, even among strangers. A warm fire and a hot meal were basic rights, even in the poorest homes. Some things don't change, even if the traveler comes from much further away. Neri looked at both of them with her silvery eyes. You could have been afraid. You could have called your authorities, or tried to capture me for study. Instead, you offered me tea and taught me about snowflakes. She smiled, and the whole room seemed to glow a little brighter. Perhaps humans understand some important things that my people have forgotten. The snowstorm outside grew stronger again, but inside Jiho's cabin, no one minded. The fire crackled warmly as Neri shared stories about her world, while Jiho and Sumai told her about life on Earth. The night grew deeper, but none of them felt tired. In our world, Neri explained, we have no seasons. Our scientists controlled the weather long ago. It's always perfect, never too hot or too cold. She looked out the window at the swirling snow. But watching this storm, I wonder if we lost something important when we gained that control. Sumai nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life come from changes we can't control, like how the leaves turn colors in autumn, or how the first snow makes everything look new. Jiho brought out an old photo album. He showed Neri pictures of the mountain during different seasons. Cherry blossoms in spring, green forests in summer, red and gold leaves in autumn, and snow in winter. Neri touched each photo gently with her glowing fingers. Your world changes so much, she said softly. Perhaps that's why humans are so adaptable, so creative. In our world, everything stays the same. We have peace and comfort, but we've lost the art of adjustment, of finding beauty in change. As midnight approached, Sumai taught Neri how to make hot chocolate. The ambassador was amazed by how different it tasted from tea. She asked many questions about where chocolate came from, how it was made, and why humans created so many different types of food and drinks. On our world, Neri said, holding her hot chocolate close, we think of Earth as a dangerous place. We see your wars, your conflicts, your environmental problems. But sitting here, I realize we've been seeing only part of the story. Jiho smiled. Life on Earth isn't perfect, he said. We make many mistakes, but we also create beautiful things, help each other, and try to learn from our errors. Sometimes, the most important moments are the quiet ones, like sharing a warm drink on a cold night. Neri set down her cup and walked to the window. Her reflection in the glass seemed to shimmer with the falling snow outside. My people believe we are more advanced than humans, she said. We have better technology, longer lives, and no conflicts. But we've lost the ability to appreciate simple things. We don't know how to handle unexpected situations or find joy in small moments. Sumai joined her at the window. Maybe being advanced isn't just about having better technology, she suggested. Maybe it's also about keeping what's valuable from the past while moving forward. The ambassador turned to look at both of them. In the firelight, her silver hair cast gentle shadows on the wall. When I landed here, I thought I would simply wait out the storm and leave. I never expected to learn so much about humanity, or to question so much about my own world. Outside, the wind sang through the trees, and the snow continued to fall. But inside the cabin, three beings from different worlds shared stories and understanding, finding common ground in the simple pleasure of friendship on a winter night. As the night deepened, Jiho added more wood to the fire. The flames cast warm shadows across the room, while Neri shared more about her civilization's history. She explained how they had developed their advanced technology over thousands of years, but something in her voice suggested sadness. We thought we were making everything better, she said, watching the fire dance. We controlled the weather, ended illness, and built cities in the sky. But now I wonder if we lost something important along the way. Sumai, who had been quiet for a while, spoke up. What do you mean? She asked, pouring fresh tea for everyone. Neri held her teacup, her fingers glowing softly against the ceramic. In all our advancement, We forgot how to adapt. We forgot the joy of unexpected moments. She looked at the snow outside. In your world, people must work together when storms come. They must help each other. On my world, we never need help anymore. Jai-ho nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes difficulties bring out the best in people, he said. Like tonight, if there hadn't been a snowstorm, you wouldn't have landed here. And I wouldn't have learned about hot chocolate. Neri added with a smile that lit up the room literally, her gentle glow brightening, or paper snowflakes, or the warmth of sitting by a real fire. Sumai stood up and walked to her bag. She pulled out a small, hand-knitted scarf she had planned to give to Jai-ho. Instead, she handed it to Neri. This is something else we do on Earth, she explained. We give gifts to show friendship. Neri touched the scarf gently, her eyes wide with wonder. You made this, with your hands. When Sumai nodded, the ambassador carefully wrapped it around her neck. The wool looked strange against her glowing skin, but somehow it felt right. On our world, Neri said softly, we can create anything we want with machines. But this, knowing someone spent time making something just to keep another person warm, we don't have anything like this anymore. Jai-ho stood up and went to his bookshelf. He returned with an old astronomy book, filled with his grandfather's handwritten notes in the margins. Here, he said, offering it to Neri, so you can learn about how we see the stars. Neri opened the book carefully, touching the handwritten notes with gentle fingers. These are your grandfather's thoughts, she asked. When Jai-ho nodded, her eyes filled with what looked like silvery tears. We store all our information in computers. We don't write by hand anymore. We don't leave pieces of ourselves in books for others to find. The three sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crack and the wind blow outside. Each was thinking about how two very different civilizations could learn from each other. One had mastered the stars but lost the simple joys of life. The other still struggled with many problems, but remembered how to find beauty in small moments and meaning in helping others. I think I understand now, Neri said finally, still holding the book carefully. True advancement isn't just about making life easier. It's about keeping what makes life worth living. Early morning light began to touch the snow-covered trees outside the cabin. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine white landscape that sparkled in the dawn. Inside, Neri stood by the window, holding her communications device. It was time for her to contact her rescue ship. They will be here soon, she said, turning to face Jai-ho and Sumai. Both humans looked tired after staying up all night, but their eyes were bright with friendship. But before they arrive, I need to make an important decision. Jai-ho poured the last of the tea into their cups. What kind of decision? He asked. The morning sun made Neri's glowing form seem even more ethereal, like she was made partly of light. For centuries, my people have watched Earth from afar, Neri explained. We have strict rules about not interfering with developing worlds. We believe humans weren't ready for contact with advanced civilizations. She touched the wool scarf that Sumai had given her, but now I think we were wrong. Sumi moved closer to the window, watching as birds began to land on the snow-covered branches outside. What changed your mind? She asked softly. Everything, Neri replied. The way you welcomed a stranger without fear. How you share food and stories. The way you make things by hand to keep others warm. She held up Jai-ho's grandfather's astronomy book. How you pass knowledge down through generations, not just with facts, but with personal notes and memories. The ambassador's communication device made a gentle chiming sound. My rescue ship is approaching, she said. They're asking for my report and recommendations about Earth. Jai-ho and Sumai watched as Neri spoke into her device. Her musical language filled the room with strange but beautiful sounds. When she finished, she turned back to them with a bright smile. I told them that Earth should no longer be classified as a developing world to be avoided, she said. I recommended that we begin official diplomatic contact with humanity, starting with peaceful cultural exchange. Will your leaders agree? Jai-Ho asked, wondering what this might mean for Earth's future. They trust my judgment, Neri replied. And I have evidence to support my decision. She held up the teacup, the scarf, and the book. These simple things show that humans understand something my people have forgotten. That true civilization isn't just about solving problems with technology. It's about caring for others and finding joy in simple moments. Through the window, they could see a shimmer in the morning sky. Neri's rescue ship was approaching, though it was nearly invisible against the bright winter sun. What happens now? Sumai asked, her voice mixed with both excitement and sadness at the thought of Neri leaving. Now, Neri said with a warm smile, we begin something new. Your mountain cabin, where strangers became friends over tea and stories, will be remembered as the place where Earth and my world first truly connected. Not through official meetings or grand ceremonies, but through simple kindness and shared humanity. The rescue ship was getting closer now, its outline becoming clearer against the morning sky. But even as Neri prepared to leave, all three knew that this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something much bigger than a chance meeting on a snowy night. 10 years had passed since that snowy night in 1982. Jai-Ho's cabin looked different now, though its heart remained the same. The old radio telescope still stood beside it, but it was joined by newer, more advanced equipment. The cabin had been carefully expanded, but Jai-Ho had made sure to keep the original fireplace where they had first shared tea with Neri. Sumai still visited regularly, though now she wasn't just checking on an old friend. She had become Earth's primary cultural liaison with Neri's people, teaching them about human traditions while learning about their advanced civilization. The library where she worked had grown into an interstellar cultural center, filled with books and artifacts from both worlds. On this particular winter evening, Jai-Ho and Sumai sat by the familiar fireplace, waiting for their guest. The snow fell softly outside, just as it had on that first night. When they heard the gentle humming sound, they both smiled. Neri's ship appeared in the clearing, still elegant but no longer strange to their eyes. Neri stepped out of her ship, wearing the same scarf Sumai had given her years ago. It hadn't aged a day, preserved by her people's technology. She hurried through the snow, leaving faint glowing footprints now instead of no prints at all. She had learned to connect more physically with Earth's environment over the years. I brought something special, Neri said after their warm greetings. She pulled out what looked like an ordinary book, but when she opened it, the pages came alive with moving images and soft sounds. It was the story of that first night, preserved in her people's advanced memory technology. The book showed their first meeting, the shared tea, the paper snowflakes, all captured in living detail. This story is now required learning for all our young ones, Neri explained. It teaches them what we almost forgot, the importance of simple moments and unexpected kindness. Jai-Ho looked around his cabin, now filled with a mixture of Earth objects and gifts from Neri's world. Did you ever imagine that one snowstorm would change so much? He asked. The biggest changes often start in the smallest ways, Sumai replied. She was holding one of the paper snowflakes Neri had made that first night, still glowing faintly after all these years. The cabin had become more than just a home. It was now a symbol of friendship between two worlds. School children from both Earth and Neri's planet would visit to learn about the night when two civilizations found common ground over cups of tea and falling snow. The universe is vast, Neri said, warming her hands by the fire just as she had done that first night. But sometimes the most important discoveries happen in the smallest places. My people thought we needed grand ceremonies and official meetings to connect with other worlds. Instead, it took a snowstorm, a cup of tea, and two kind humans who weren't afraid of something different. Outside, the snow continued to fall on the expanded cabin, on the mix of Earth and alien technology, on the place where a chance landing had grown into a bridge between worlds. Inside, three friends who had changed the course of two civilizations sat by the fire, sharing tea and stories. proving that sometimes the gentlest approach could have the most powerful impact. The universe, it seemed, had been waiting for exactly this kind of quiet wisdom all along.